we're doing life with Jason Clemmons, DC, but our timing's off just a little bit. But we're here. We're ready to go. I'm fired up. It's March. It's time for health. I hope you guys enjoyed taking health to church last night. And I thought it was a really good one. I really do appreciate what they do over at Hillside Church and the things that they teach us and how we can apply it to health. So if you missed that show, go back and check it out from last night. We're live. It's 98.7 Walk by Faith, 1420 AM, 987radio.com. We're all over the place. We're on social media at The Rock Health and Wellness Centers on Facebook, at Health from The Rock on YouTube, and Dr. Jason Clemmons on Twitter. So that's where we are. If you're going to share those, share them with your friends. All we're trying to do in this show is to try to get people to be as healthy as possible on earth so that you can shine your light as bright as you can and make the world a better place. That's what it's about right here. I'm not selling you anything. You can go to, if you want to, therock.standardprocess.com. You can pick up your standard process supplements, like your Cataplex B Core and all those good things if you want to. But we don't sell things on this show. We just talk about health. I don't even have any sponsors. maybe someday I should get some sponsors. But right now, I don't have any sponsors. I don't get paid for this. I don't get paid for being on the radio. Whatever goes on over there at 98.7 is their business. They just let me have a show, which I appreciate. And they do a great job over there too. So if you guys are sponsors and you're listening to the show, get with Michael Wyatt over there, and he'd be glad to get you guys set up as far as that goes. So that's great for the radio station. But for the rest of us, we're just here talking about health. And man, it's March, and this is where we should be setting our New Year's resolutions right here. March is where is the beginning. It's the kicking off of it's the football season of health is what it is. Like January is off season as far as I'm concerned. You shouldn't be setting your New Year's resolutions in January when it relates to your health because the whole world's frozen. But it's blown in. You should have seen Lubbock in the last 2 days. I started to send one of my friends in South Florida a video of what was going on out there in the last 2 days. It was like living on Mars. It was crazy. It's crazy, the wind and the dirt. And I even started sneezing. I was like, what do we talk about all the time? You want your immune system, you want your nervous system, you want your health to be ready for whatever you have to face, right? We did not know we were going to be facing these 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts with all this dirt that's going on out here and then covering all of us in that dirt. You know what's in that dirt? It's not just dirt, right? It's not just dirt. There's all kinds of stuff in that dirt. And there's all kinds of chemicals in that dirt. When they fly that yellow plane over the top of that field and they spray that field with chemicals, that chemical gets in that dirt. It also gets in our water, causes all kinds of trouble, right? Well, it gets in the dirt, and then when the dirt blows, all that stuff that's in that dirt is what we got to deal with, right? So my body saw some of that last night, and this morning, and it was like, get out of here. Like, it just started sneezing. So, but it's been windy. It's been really windy, but sometimes you got to blow that winter out of here and get ready for spring. And that's what we've been doing. And that's what we should be doing with our health right now. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to get after it and talk about it. And but we are going to open with an article. So I just want you guys to know this because we're not going to spend too much time in it, but it fits perfectly into what we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks about immune response, and the host is the big deal. And if you can get that, what I'm saying when I say the host is the big deal, what I'm talking about is me and you, right? The health that we have inside our bodies before we get exposed to whatever's out there is going to determine how we handle whatever it is that's out there. It doesn't matter if it's a flu virus or if it's a measles or if it's COVID or if it's whatever, the wind or the dirt or whatever it is that or a couch as far as that goes, like a rough day as far as that goes, stress, all those things that we deal with, all those things that we deal with, the level of our internal environment is going to dictate how we're going to what the outcome is going to be. It's not the external environment. Nobody teaches that. They don't teach us that when we're little kids, because if I can sell you the idea that it's the external environment and you have no options, you have no choice. It's like telling you that your cholesterol is high because of your grandpa's cholesterol was high, or you've got arthritis because your dad has arthritis. If I can convince you of that and I can sell you a drug to address that issue, I win. Right? That's where that came from. And that's a little bit what I want to talk about tonight in this article, because there's a couple things I just want to show you before we get into some more of it. But there's a new article that just came out, a research paper that was done, the Department of Immunobiology at Yale University School of Medicine. And the title of the article says, Immunological and Antigenic Signatures Associated with Chronic Illness After COVID-19 Vaccination. Okay, and I'm not getting into the political, all this stuff. I want it to go right along with what we've been saying over multiple weeks now. Okay, they're talking about chronic illness after COVID-19 vaccination, and this is the Department of Immunobiology, Yale University School of Medicine. Okay, so it's legitimate stuff. It's by legitimate. I mean, if Yale, if we're going to throw Yale under the bus and say no, that's not real, then I don't know, we might as well just not even have any legitimate science or any legitimate stuff. So they did the summary. It's kind of funny. It's really funny because these guys that talk about this stuff, what they do is they cannot help but just justify their existence right off the bat. And what they said, the very first sentence is, COVID-19 vaccines have prevented millions of COVID-19 deaths. I don't think that I don't know how you can say that in a scientific paper. Like, that's an opinion as far as I'm concerned. But that's a here and a there or whatever deal. But it says, yet a small fraction of the population reports a chronic debilitating condition after COVID-19 vaccination, often referred to as post-vaccination syndrome. To explore potential pathobiological features associated with post-vaccine syndrome, we conducted a study involving 42 post-vaccine syndrome participants and 22 healthy controls. Compared with controls, the post-vaccine syndrome participants exhibited differences in immune profiles. Okay, that's the very first thing I want to say. And I want us to hear it because it fits in with what we're talking about tonight, or what we've been talking about, right? The host. That's what I'm talking about. The thing about this is, and I'll fast forward just a little bit. No, let me stay on track. Let me stay on track right here. So they exhibited differences in immune profiles, including circulating memory and effector CD4 T cells, type 1 and type 2, and increase in tumor necrosis factor alpha and CD8 cells. Now, what is tumor necrosis factor alpha and CD8 cells? Inflammation, right? They've got an increased amount. The PVS, that's post-vaccination syndrome, the PVS participants also had lower anti-spike antibody titers, primarily due to fewer vaccine doses. Evidence of recent Epstein-Barr virus reactivation was observed more frequently in this PVS participants. Individuals with PVS exhibited elevated levels of circulating spike protein compared to healthy controls. Healthy controls, and that's funny, I'm going to show you what that means here in just a second. And these findings reveal potential immune differences in individuals with post-vaccine syndrome. Okay? Potential immune differences. All right, so they went through this, and COVID-19 vaccines are associated with rare acute adverse events such as myocarditis and pericarditis, thrombosis, thrombocytopenia, Guillain-Barré syndrome, transverse myelitis, and Bell's palsy. In addition, some individuals have reported post-vaccination symptoms resembling long COVID beginning shortly after vaccination. This syndrome is characterized by symptoms such as exercise intolerance, excessive fatigue, numbness, brain fog, neuropathy, insomnia, palpitations, myalgia, tinnitus, or humming in the ears, headache, burning sensations, and dizziness. Now, we did not have any of these conversations beforehand. You remember when all of those experts in that field were, when COVID hit, and Dr. Fauci and all those experts and the governors and the local people and the mayors and everybody in the United States was telling everybody to get shots. They were telling everybody, you need to have your vaccine, right? Not one time do I remember Dr. Fauci or the governor or the mayor or any of the people involved in this, not one time do I ever remember them saying, now listen, you could have exercise intolerance, excessive fatigue, numbness, brain fog, neuropathy, insomnia, palpitations by taking this shot. Not one time do we ever get that, right? Because you don't get the other side of any of them. We're not hearing it right now with measles shots either. All we're hearing about is measles shots is the only way to be safe from measles. We're not hearing about any of the other side of the measles shot, which is fine. They can say whatever they want to say. That's totally fair. Dr. Fauci can say whatever he wants to say. The governor and the president and President Trump bragged so many times about how he got that warp speed thing kicked off and how he got all that done. And then Biden came in and did the whole thing. So both presidents, Republicans and Democrats together, both of them stood up there and they told everybody to get a shot, but not one time. Well, think about it. If we would have had a public meeting and we would have had all of the gurus of health, what do they call them? Local health authorities, which I think is kind of funny that they don't ever ask anybody else, but that's neither here nor there either. But if they would have all sat down and said, everybody, now listen, I want you to get this shot because I really do think it's good for you, and I really do think it's going to keep you out of the hospital, but I just want you to know you might get brain fog and neuropathy and insomnia and excessive fatigue and exercise intolerance. How many people would have said, you know what, I think I'll pass on that. I think I'll just try to get healthy. Maybe some of them would have, right? I didn't write any of this stuff. It came straight from Yale. Okay. The molecular mechanisms of PVS remain largely unknown. However, there is considerable overlap in self-reported symptoms between long COVID and PVS, as well as shared exposure to SARS-CoV-2 spike in the context of inflammatory responses during infection or vaccination. Listen to this. In susceptible individuals, vaccines may contribute to long-term symptoms by multiple mechanisms. How do you know if you're a susceptible individual? And do you know before you get the shot that you are susceptible and that you might actually suffer from some of these problems? No, you don't. You don't know that. But the point is that it's the host. It's the person that's getting exposed to the external environment. That's the problem. That's the problem. That's what I said to the mayor. The mayor was telling me, I said, Mayor, you're calling me a villain in my own town. You're making me out to be a bad guy, and I'm not a bad guy. But you're making me out to be some sort of villain. He said, Jason, all I can tell you is that there's 200 people in the hospital and 190 something of them are unvaccinated. And I said, yeah, boss, but there's 3,000 cases in our town and there's only 200 people in the hospital. Why would we vaccinate, if we had 3,000 cases in our town, why would we vaccinate 300,000 people because we're trying to keep 200 people out of the hospital? Why wouldn't we just try to figure out how to teach the 200 people how not to be in the hospital? Why is that so illogical? Right? Why does that make why does that make people like me turn into quacks? Why, like I don't know what I'm talking about, or that doesn't even make any sense. Why don't we say, hey, look, there's 3,000 people and 2,800 of them didn't die and didn't go to the hospital. There was just 200 of them that ended up in the hospital. So why don't we leave the 2,800 people alone and try to teach those 200, hey, look, there's some things that you could do to make sure that you don't have this inflammatory response when you get this virus, right? It says here, for example, vaccine components such as mRNA, lipid nanoparticles, and adenoviral vectors trigger activation of pattern recognition receptors. Unregulated stimulation of innate immunity could lead to chronic inflammation. Second, it has been shown that the spike protein vaccination circulates in the plasma as early as 1 day after vaccination. They didn't talk about that either. They just when they give you the shot in the arm, they don't tell you, hey, it's fixing to go into your blood and go all through your whole body, right? It may result in prolonged symptoms in certain individuals. Further, its ability to cross the blood-brain barrier, the local S expression could result in neurocognitive symptoms. They didn't tell you that either. Did they tell you that when you got the COVID shot, that the spike protein can cross the blood-brain barrier and it might cause, quote, neurocognitive symptoms? They didn't tell you that because they don't want you to know that, because they don't want to talk about that, because it doesn't fit the agenda of selling you the shot, or it doesn't fit the agenda of helping you get healthy. The vaccine-induced immune response may be triggering the stimulation of autoreactive lymphocytes. Here we go, right? All right, here's the interesting thing about this, okay? And this is the take it on home part of it. It says a total of 42 participants with PVS who had no pre-existing comorbidities and 22 contemporaneous healthy controls who did not report PVS after receiving the COVID-19 vaccine were included. So their healthy controls are the guys who got the shot but did not get post-vaccine syndrome. So they had 42 people that got post-vaccine syndrome and 22 people that did not. But all 66 of them, all 64 of them, got a vaccine. And that's my point. That is what I'm trying to show you. 64 people in this study got vaccinated. 42 people got post-vaccine syndrome. 22 did not. What's the difference between the 64 people? It's the internal environment that those people had. It's not the external environment. Measles shots don't cause autism. It's exactly 100% true. Your immune response to the measles shot may cause autism, right? Your immune response to glyphosate may cause autism. Your immune response to a flu shot may cause MS. That's the truth. It's our internal. You can give these shots to thousands of people and nothing happens. But if you give it to somebody whose immune response gets too high, then all hell breaks loose with them inside their body. And that's what I wanted to really show you right there, because I appreciate that personally. I appreciate the fact that 64 of these people, all 64 of them got the shot. It goes back to 25 years ago when my brother-in-law used to say to me, Jason, there's 25 kids in third grade and 15 kids get the flu and 10 kids don't get the flu. What's the difference between the two groups? And my first thing that I said out of my mouth 25 years ago was, I guess the 10 kids didn't get exposed to the flu virus. And he was like, really? You remember third grade? Yep, exactly. 64 people got exposed to the vaccine. 22 of them didn't have any problem at all. But 42 of them had all kinds of things, that exercise intolerance, excessive fatigue, numbness, brain fog, neuropathy, insomnia, palpitation, myalgia, tinnitus. The all-cause mortality has gone up. Cancer has gone up. Everybody knows somebody that's died of cancer lately. Like there's all kinds of things going on right there, right? So infection with SARS-CoV-2 significantly impacts immune signatures. Between case control cohorts reported having history of one or more previous SARS-CoV-2 infections, however, upwards of 40% of SARS-CoV-2 infections are asymptomatic. Remember that whole thing where they said, I was going to be the one that made your grandma sick because I didn't get my shot? But what it's saying right here is 40% of SARS-CoV-2 infections are asymptomatic. It just means that you don't even know when you're infected because your immune system is handling it all. That's the same thing I'm saying about the measles and all the rest of that stuff, right? So just think. I mean, I appreciate those guys for doing that study and telling us all about that stuff. And I appreciate them putting all of the people that had the vaccine in there because that's what we know. And you guys that listen to the show on a regular basis, you're getting to where you're really starting to understand this. I think you're saying saying to yourself, "Yep, I get it." What he's saying is, it's my internal environment that I can control. It's my internal environment that's going to determine whether or not I respond positively or negatively to my external environment. And it doesn't make any difference if it's physical, chemical, or mental emotional stress. That's the foundation of the subluxation in the chiropractic office is the physical, chemical, and mental emotional stress. So if I'm fixing to lift a couch, my internal environment, including my neurology and my fitness, is going to determine whether or not I'm able to lift that couch or whether or not I'm going to get hurt when I try to lift the couch. My internal environment is going to determine how I'm going to deal with my external stresses of mental emotional stress. If I have a bad day or I run out of money or I have something, if let's just say my backflow preventer busts and freezes and it costs me $2,700 to fix it. My internal environment is going to determine how I respond to that event, especially after it's right after my car blew up and I had to pay $1,900 to fix that, like 2 weeks previous to that. It's my internal environment that handles my external stressor, right? It's my internal environment that handles the virus. It's my internal environment that handles this wind. I don't imagine I'm going to be sneezing for a month. I just, and maybe I need to get my internal environment even stronger. Maybe I need to up my vitamin D in the wind. Maybe I need to make sure that I've got my omega-3s where it's going like that, right? It's just super important because it's that internal environment. And don't be kidded for 1 second. Don't be fooled for 1 second that it's not by design. This whole thing is by design. And it started all the way back. You guys want to do that? We did a show last year on this thing, but you guys can go all the way back and read this report right here called the Flexner Report. If you want to really know the history of medicine in America and how it all started with Andrew Carnegie and hiring Dr. Flexner, go back and just read Medical Education in the United States and Canada, a report to the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching by Abraham Flexner. And that'll explain to you how we got into this allopathic model and pharmaceuticals. And Carnegie was the richest man in the world because he just sold U.S. Steel to J.P. Morgan, and he felt like he needed to do something. And that's been going on since the beginning of time. Rich people feel like they need to do something, so they dictate to all the rest of us how we're supposed to live. And that's what happened with the Flexner Report. And then Dr. Flexner went over to Germany. He fell in love with Germany. And if you want to know about Germany, read this book called Blitzed. We did a book report on that last year too. These guys are the fathers of cocaine. They're the ones that dominated the cocaine market after World War I. They're the ones that created methamphetamine and Pervitin and all that stuff. Germany, the global dealer. This didn't change after First World War. While France and Great Britain were able to acquire natural stimulants such as coffee, tea, vanilla, pepper, and other natural remedies for colonies overseas, Germany, which lost its comparatively sparse colonial possessions under the terms of the Versailles Treaty, had to find other ways. Stimulants had to be produced synthetically. In fact, Germany was in dire need of artificial assistance. The war had inflicted deep wounds and caused the nation both physical and psychic pain. In the 1920s, drugs became more and more important for the despondent population between the Baltic Sea and the Alps. And this is the bunch that Dr. Flexner was so enamored with that he came back and made the report, and that's how we ended up with an allopathic model in the United States in 1910. I didn't make that up either. That's you can read it, and that's and who owned the pharmaceutical industry? The Rockefellers. So now we get the Rockefellers and the Carnegies put together, and now that's where you get the shot that no one tells you that you're going to get excessive fatigue and brain fog and neuropathy with, right? Comes from it's the same line. So go back and read that if you want to. So how do we stay well, right? If we're going to create an internal environment, for ourselves, how do we stay well? And what can we do? And what happens if we don't, right? So let's look at this one, because this is a hot off the presses from Dr. Murphy right here. Autonomic dysfunction. Let's see if I got this one. Yeah. Autonomic dysfunction is the motor of chronic critical illness. Okay, so we're switching gears. We're getting off of that story, and we're going into this. Autonomic is your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems, right? It's the ones that speed your heart up and slow your heart down. It increases your stomach acid and decreases your stomach acid. It's responsible for immune system function. Whoa. Sorry, we got to take a break. I know that's weird because it's in my head, it's in my ears right there. But you guys stick around with us. We're going to get into it. We got a couple of really cool things I want to show you on the second half of the show. So stick around. We'll be right back. This is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. I need an assistant. I need an assistant that sits over there and does all this stuff for me, and then they tell me, all right, you got 10 seconds or whatever, so that doesn't surprise me. It just like blast in my ears. All of a sudden the music starts, and then here we go. But let's go on, and we can catch them up with this because they'll still be talking about it. But autonomic dysfunction of the motor is the motor of chronic critical illness. So if we're going to, it's funny, sometimes when I think about this, it goes back to my football coaching days. I think you defend against what they're doing, right? So it's like, how do you know what they're going to do? Well, you got to break them down. It's like coaching defense is like it's like reverse engineering what's about to happen, right? So how do I stay well? Well, what makes me sick? Like if I figure out what makes me sick, then it's easier for me to stay well. And this article says right here, this is Department of Anesthesia and Intensive Care Medicine, St. George Hospital in the UK, London, UK. Department of Anesthesia, Pain Management and Critical Care, University College, London, UK, and a group from Department of Medicine, University of College, London. Yeah, cites 50 references. So established autonomic dysfunction is common in patients who develop critical illness. Say it again. Established autonomic dysfunction is common in patients who develop critical illness. Now, last Friday, we did a whole show on neck and shoulder dysfunction and the autonomic nervous system in the brain. And so if you guys want to go back to last Friday's show, you can see where abnormal mechanoreceptor and proprioception of the neck, and I'll show you a great picture of that here in just a second. But if your neck's not moving properly, then your brain's not functioning properly. And if your brain's not functioning properly, you have an imbalance of sympathetic and parasympathetic activity. Okay? Autonomic dysfunction is a ubiquitous feature at the onset of critical illness. If your autonomic nervous system has lost its balance, you're increasing your chances of having critical illness. Hang on one second. Okay, everybody, we're back. This is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. We're talking about health tonight. And so we're talking about this article right here from several different departments out of London. And we're talking about autonomic dysfunction is ubiquitous feature at the onset of critical illness. Persistence of autonomic dysfunction in established critical illness autonomic dysfunction drives cardiac injury and failure. We know that, right? We know that from the articles that we just went over. Like it was the very first thing. Just go back to Friday and listen to that. The cardiac function of sympathetic nervous system, dysfunction of the sympathetic nervous system, or hyperactivity of the sympathetic nervous system, hypoactivity of the sympathetic nervous system from abnormal function of the neck firing into the brain can cause us to have heart problems, right? So the key points from the article. Many of the insults that lead to critical illness, such as sepsis, trauma, and major surgery, either cause or are perhaps the consequence of profound alterations in the autonomic nervous system control. And that just cannot be, it's so fun, really. It honestly is kind of fun when you start to figure out the puzzle of this whole thing, right? It's like when you're doing a big old crossword puzzle and you get enough pieces put together in the puzzle, not a crossword puzzle, a puzzle, a big puzzle. If you're putting all the pieces together, jigsaw puzzle is what I was trying to remember. If you get enough pieces of the jigsaw puzzle in place, then all of a sudden you can start to see where the rest of them fit, right? If you understand its internal environment first, not external environment, then and you start to really understand it's my immune response that's going to dictate whether or not I have a positive or negative outcome to this thing. It's the internal environment. And then you start to read the sentences with a different level of understanding. When you start to read the sentences and it says, many of the insults that lead to critical illness, such as sepsis, trauma, and major surgery, either cause or perhaps are the consequence of profound alterations in the autonomic nervous system control. So what is that saying? It's saying that if I have alterations in my autonomic nervous system, then I'm not going to handle those problems near as good. Several cardinal features of chronic critical illness, support the assertion that autonomic dysfunction is a core mechanism underlying the development and perpetuation. Sometimes I can't read. I'm sorry. Of multi-organ failure. Autonomic abnormalities can be detected in pre-disease states such as pre-hypertension. Persistent sympathetic activation and parasympathetic withdrawal establishes autonomic dysfunction and fuels multiple organ dysfunctions of varying severities. Okay, man, how cool is that? Because we gotta do it. We haven't done it, and shoot, it's probably been over a week. It's probably been a couple of weeks since we've shown you, since we've done this little trick right here. Right? Brain. Right, left. Activity up into the brain on the right side and not coming across on the left side. What happens? We get overactivation of the right hemisphere. And what does that mean? We get increased sympathetic nervous system and we get decreased parasympathetic nervous system, right? When we do not get proper flow, nerve flow, when we do not get proper firing of the nervous system, we're going to get increased sympathetics and decreased parasympathetics, right? We know that. You guys know that. So what does the article say? The article says the same exact thing. The article says persistent sympathetic activation and parasympathetic withdrawal establishes autonomic dysfunction and fuels multi-organ dysfunction of varying severity. Right? Yes, that's exactly critical. It's critical right there. Although various techniques have been used to detect alterations in autonomic control in a wide range of diseases, chiefly among them is concentrating on the autonomic modulation of the heart rate variability, and the arterial barrel reflex. So heart rate variability is that's what we have here in the office, thanks to Dr. Fraley and Ruidoso. We have heart rate variability that I went on Friday, I did a nutritional evaluation with one of the patients that came in. And one of the parts of the nutritional evaluation is the heart rate variability. And what does heart rate variability mean? It means the measurement, the variability based on measurement of the heart, the electrical activity of the heart based on sympathetic and parasympathetic response. Rest and recover, parasympathetic, fight or flight, sympathetic. That's what that means. Experimental and clinical studies have demonstrated rapid and profound alterations in autonomic function following a range of apparent disparate pathologies leading to critical illness. Acute injury will cause rapid death. Yeah, right. Acute artery injury will cause rapid death unless the sympathetic nervous system rapidly generates increased catecholamine activity. Systemically, this is controlled by the rostroventral medulla, the crucial brainstem substrate that generates increased sympathetic activity. Yeah, so that's some of the stuff that we talked about last week on Friday. Myocardial injury, cell injury, can be induced by excessive sympathetic activity through the accumulation of intracellular calcium triggering myocardial necrosis. Okay? Increased sympathetic activity can injure your heart, is what that says. Increased fight or flight response can injure your heart. You know, when I was in the lab in chiropractic school, I haven't said this in a while, but I was in physiology lab, and we had researchers on the campus at Parker College when I was in school. And the researchers were doing this study to determine what the upper cervical adjustment did to the autonomic nervous system. And so I was the one in the lab, and I had to take my shirt off. I had to lay down on the table. They had to hook a bunch of leads up to me. And then the vice president of the school came in and adjusted me with an upper cervical technique called a toggle. And it's a very violent type of adjustment. I mean, it's like, boom, it hits the table, and the table drops. And it was like a crazy moment for me. And I remember how like nervous and fight or flight I felt consciously, that 0.5% of our conscious function, right? That of our total function, that 0.5% of consciousness that I had was feeling stressed out because I had my shirt off in class in front of all the people. Number two, I was hooked up to all these leads by these Chinese guys that worked in the lab. They didn't even speak English. They were literally from China, right? They were hooking me up. I had the vice president of the school come in and adjust me. I didn't even know the vice president of the school. He just checked me and adjusted me. I had my professors in the class. I had all of this conscious fight or flight response. But you know what happened when I got adjusted? I had a decreased sympathetic response and an increased parasympathetic response. My heart rate went down. My blood pressure pre and post was down. I had a parasympathetic response from an adjustment of my atlas. Why? Because the 99.5% of my innate intelligence was more threatened by the subluxation than it was by the 0.5% of my conscious awareness of my environment. I don't really understand. I don't know if you understand what that means. I don't know, but your innate intelligence perceives the subluxation as a threat. Your innate intelligence perceives the subluxation as a threat. And the subluxation is putting pressure on your nervous system. And when you have pressure on your nervous system, you guys know it. When you have a rib out of place, or you've got that pain in your neck that's running down your arm, it irritates your whole day, right? It makes your whole day worse when that's going on. You get irritated with your kids, you get irritated with your spouse, you get irritated with supper, you get irritated with like the whole everything. Your shirt doesn't even fit right. You're so upset about it. It's like, oh, I hate it when I feel bad like that, right? Your innate intelligence does not like to have pressure on its nervous system. And when you take the pressure off of the nervous system, then you change the autonomic response. And when you change the autonomic response, you make yourself healthier and less likely to have a chronic illness right here. Pre-existing autonomic dysfunction prior to the insult predisposes patients to irreversible autonomic dysfunction and deterioration in the pre-existing organ dysfunction. Pre-existing autonomic dysfunction. If you are subluxated prior to the insult, it predisposes you to irreversible autonomic dysfunction and deterioration in your organ system, including your heart. It says suggests preventative value of regular chiropractic care. It's like, yes, am I a chiropractic warrior? Yes. Why? Because chiropractic makes you healthier. It's it's not voodoo. It's science. It's neurology. It makes you healthier right there. Inflammation mediators directly impair cardiac receptor signaling. Inflammatory mediators directly impair cardiac receptor signaling. The more inflammation you have, the less function your heart does. Attenuation of increased sympathetic drive during sepsis may prevent these deleterious developments. The preservation of parasympathetic function, which is otherwise rapidly reduced at the onset of critical illness, also limits organ injury through a range of mechanisms. Whenever we do the heart rate variability study, if you guys haven't done it, you should get it done. If you're a patient in the office, you should get your heart rate variability checked. Because one of the things that what that part of the article is saying right there is when we measure, when we do heart rate variability, what we get is this graph, and it measures parasympathetic. It measures parasympathetic on the horizontal, and it measures sympathetic on the vertical. Okay, and it'll tell you where you start based on your heart rate variability. It'll give you a point at where you started. It'll say, okay, you started where we want you to start is right here at 1 and 1. And let's call this quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 and quadrant 3 right here. Okay, so where you start is at 1 and 1, but some people start over here in quadrant 2, and some people start over here in quadrant 3. Now, what difference does that make? Well, here's what it means. If we're measuring positive and negative parasympathetic activity and positive and negative sympathetic activity on this graph, if you go from right to left, and you guys on the radio, if you go, we've got a big old plus sign graph on the screen. If you go from right to left, that means your parasympathetic nervous system is losing function. If you're going in this direction, that means your parasympathetic nervous system is losing function. Okay? Then, if you go from top down, so a lot of people will be over in this quadrant 2, and what that means is that their parasympathetics have already given up, and their sympathetics are having to fight every single day just to keep them going. How many people feel that on a daily basis? How many of you feel that, man, I can't rest and recover at all, but I just feel like I'm constantly fighting just to keep my head above water. I'm kicking my feet as hard as I can just to keep from drowning. It just feels like it's going to overwhelm me, right? That's what quadrant 2 is on the heart rate variability analysis. But then what happens when the sympathetics quit? When the sympathetics give up and they quit, what happens is you drop below there. And you know what happens? This is where chronic illness happens. And that's what we say. When someone shows up and their graph, and I look at their heart rate variability graph, and they're over here in quadrant 3, they're in trouble. They're really in trouble. They're fixing to develop some sort of chronic illness. And that's exactly what this article is saying. And I just love it when you talk the truth, because the truth just stacks up on itself over and over again, right? And that's exactly what this is saying right here. um, the preservation of the parasympathetic function, which is otherwise rapidly reduced at the onset of critical illness, also limits organ injury through a range of mechanisms. If you have increased parasympathetics, then you've got a protection against organ injury. That's what the article is saying. Okay? The preservation of the parasympathetic function limits organ injury through a range of mechanisms. So this person that's over here in quadrant 3, they've lost their parasympathetic function. It's listen to what this is saying right here, which is otherwise rapidly reduced at the onset of critical illness. Exactly. Your parasympathetics have quit, your sympathetics have quit, your body's about to give up. It's like it's not it's getting late on this deal, right? The combination of sympathetic activation and loss of parasympathetic cardiac modulation promotes a state of induced heart failure. Very important right there. Okay? The sympathetic and parasympathetic neurotransmitters can modulate all aspects of the immune response, including cytokine production, lymphocyte proliferation, and antibody secretion. Clinical studies demonstrate that monocytic deactivation is associated with a substantially increased risk of infection and higher mortality. Yeah, when your body's giving up, when your body gives up, it's like it's bad news, right? And that's what this is saying goes along with. Let me see if I can pull this up really quick. What the heck? One second. sometimes it's so crazy the way that you're because this would be awesome if you could see it, but I just did a talk. I just did a talk. I can't even see my I don't know what the heck. All my toolbar just disappeared. It's crazy what is. Sometimes you just lose it. But anyway, I just did a talk. Hey, I got it right here. Hang on. I did a talk at Wise Group last Tuesday, and it was Dr. Lipton was describing this exact thing right here. I can pull it up on my phone and I'll just read it to you because it was great. And he's talking about biological imperative. And he says this, it represents a drive to survive. The biological imperative represents a drive to survive. When we start to feel our life is threatened, we feel it in the gut first, right? We get that sick feeling in our gut. The world in which we live is not in harmony with us. That's why it's so important that you got to be careful about watching all that crap that's going on in Washington, D.C., and Ukraine and all that stuff. If you got some sort of power to do something about it, then get after it. But if you don't, you better watch it. That's a trap right there. That'll make you sick as a dog when you start to realize that. If we start to change and send out love instead of just receiving fear, it changes our chemistry. And it's this. Chemistry released by the brain in fear shuts down the growth mechanism of the body to conserve energy, shuts down the maintenance of the body, and leads to disease and illness. 90% of disease is lifestyle and psychology of love and fear. Be in love, and your body will be maintained, and your immune system will be at peak performance. So that's from Dr. Bruce Lipton right there. Is why I brought that up. But it's this: when you get this chemistry release, it shuts down the maintenance of the body and leads to disease and illness. And that's what the article is saying right there. The article is saying the same thing. It's saying that the body is shutting down. The clinical studies demonstrate that monocyte deactivation is associated with substantially increased risk of infection and, and higher mortality. You just turn off your immune system. Your immune system just shuts down because it's not functioning properly because you've got this overactivity of the sympathetic nervous system. And that's what we know that, right? If we activate our sympathetic nervous system by overfiring our right hemisphere, if we overfire our right hemisphere and we increase our sympathetic nervous system, then what happens to our, if we do this chronically, then what happens to our immune system? It goes down, right? Because why? Because your sympathetic nervous system is looking for the tiger. And if you're going to fight a tiger, how long do you think you're going to live? If you're a bad dude, then you'll win, right? You better be a bad dude or you better have a gun because those tigers are bad. Those are athletic rascals right there, right? So when your brain sees the tiger and your brain kicks in your sympathetic response, then what's going to happen is all of a sudden your brain's going to start to conserve energy to fight the tiger. It's going to conserve. It's not going to be worried about 24 hours from now. It's not going to be worried about viruses and bacteria. It's not going to be worried about those things. It's going to be worried about the tiger that's right in front of you. So it's going to shut down your immune system because who needs an immune system if you're about to die in 90 seconds? Right? That's what happens to who needs a digestive system? How many of you have anxiety? I know none of you people do because you're taking your fish oil and you're going for walks and you guys are rocking. But maybe the new people might have. How many people have anxiety and acid reflux? How many people are taking some sort of Nexium or Protonics or one of those things, and some proton pump inhibitor that's going along, but you also have some anxiety or some depression, or you have a decreased immune function, or our favorite one, you have low testosterone because your reproductive system is not functioning properly either, right? All those things are going in there together, and it's not functioning the way that it's supposed to. So let me show you, but while we still got a little bit of time, because this is really cool right here. And so I got a book called Anatomy Trains. And in Anatomy Trains, somewhere. Now you got to, I want to make sure that I'm giving all of the credit. Yeah, there it is right there. So this is an introduction to the Anatomy Trains myofascial meridians right here is what we're looking at. All right. So and this is an awesome book. If you guys want to get it, it's really awesome just to talk about anatomy. But this whole idea in Anatomy Trains is that we have a fascia that wraps around us. It all the way. I'll move it down for a second so you can see it. But there's a fascia that it's a thick tissue, and it's a solid piece. It's a connected piece of fascia that goes all the way from the bottom of our feet all the way through, and it wraps in different ways all the way to the top of our head. Here's one from the back right here. Watch, look at that. The plantar fascia on the bottom of the foot goes through the Achilles tendon, through the calf, through the hamstring, right through the SI joint, and then the pelvis, through the paraspinal muscles of the lumbar spine, through your thoracic spine, up into your neck muscles, and right through the top of your head, and comes right around, right at the top of your eyeballs right there. That's one piece of continuous fascia that's going all the way through there, all the way from top to bottom. And fascia is a sensory organ. The skin is a sensory organ. The way that you move, the stiffness. Remember when you say stiffness? And I was gonna go up here and use this example in the bicep because it says right here, you have a single muscle theory. So if you have a picture of a bicep, it says in this single muscle theory, the bicep gets defined as a radial ulnar supinator an elbow flexor, and a weak flexor of the shoulder. In the anatomy train's view, additional information is added to this. The biceps brachii is an element in a continuous fascial plane or a myofascial meridian which runs from the outside of the thumb to the fourth rib and beyond. See, instead of just talking about your bicep independently, what you're talking about now is a piece of fascia that runs from your thumb all the way up your arm into your bicep through into this basically the pec minor area of your rib cage. That is one piece of fascia that runs through there. So when I say getting adjusted matters, I'm not kidding. It's like this fascia that runs from top to bottom, that fascial adhesion that's not functioning properly can put pressure on the mechanoreceptors and the proprioceptors of your neck, which can fire into your brain in an altered pattern, which can cause autonomic disturbances that might cause your heart not to function properly. Man, we've run out of time. You guys have a great night on the radio, and I will see you guys tomorrow night at 6. I can't leave us just yet, because it's like, you see how this whole thing fits together? People say, eat well, move well, think well. Move well, eat well, move well, think well. Move well has to do with not just exercise, but also spinal biomechanics and posture. And this whole thing is connected together from top to bottom. It's like, if you ever wondered why, when your brain's not working on one side, you have plantar fasciitis on that same side foot. And it's like you go to the doctor and they look at your foot, but some of us look at your brain, because we understand that the fascia runs from the bottom of the foot all the way to the top of the brain. And we understand that if I want to create an internal environment for myself, if I want to create an environment, a host environment that can take on the world, that can take on anything that's out there, I've got to understand my nervous system and my biomechanics that go along with all these other things that we're talking about doing. And when we look at an article like that, then the article will show us, it's like, hey, look, chronic illness comes after, or critical illness usually comes after, autonomic disturbance. Sympathetic hyperactivity, parasympathetic decreased activity, and then all of a sudden now we're sick. Right? We lose that balance, we're sick. Where did that autonomic nervous system balance come from? What started it? Abnormal diet, abnormal exercise, subluxation. Too many omega-6s. Any of those things that we talk about on a daily basis on this show, all of those things contribute to the way that our autonomic nervous system functions and the way that our organs function. That's all I got for you today. I hope that was good. Thanks for staying a few minutes extra. And I hope you guys have a great night. We'll be back tomorrow night at 6. So holler if I can help you. Before I leave, Isabel, yes. Can someone with 15% kidney function be improved with getting tested for this parasympathetic levels? Yes, absolutely. Is adjusting, or does chiropractic treat kidney problems? Absolutely not. That's not the way that it works. But does chiropractic, getting your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system balanced and working properly, is it going to help your body have a better chance to deal with whatever's going on with your kidneys? Yes, it will. A healthier person can handle 15% kidney function better than an unhealthy person can. And that's basically the answer to that question. But